right. My name is Aaron Rhodes, and you're listening to the Shuttlecock podcast. I'm here today with Sid Sowder. How you doing?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me.
No problem. And Sid runs TooMuchRock.com, and that's a Kansas City mainly music blog that's been up for at least a little over 20 years now.
Yep.
And yeah, before we were recording here, we were kind of discussing Kansas City music blogs of the past, and you brought up one called The Zone that I was just completely unfamiliar with.
Yeah, I think if you were active in the Kansas City and Lawrence music scene in the late 90s, even into the early 2000s, The Zone would have been your Bible. It was a website that covered maybe mainstream venues more so than the basement shows or the house shows that you deal with a lot. But it covered live music, and I think more importantly, it covered just about every bit of music that was released. Everybody who put out a record or CD, as was most the case then, it always got a review on The Zone, and that was something that every local band submitted for. I was looking forward to seeing what was written.
And I don't know, like, you see, like, so many, like, just real, like, completely mediocre Bandcamp links these days sometimes. Like, do you really wish that there was a review on every one of those?
I think Bandcamp has the ability to put out anything, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we could spend the next 10 minutes, and I saw an auto harp in here and a guitar, and we could record something, put it on Bandcamp, and I don't think anyone wants to review that, and I don't think anyone would want to read that review.
So, like, when stuff was still being physically mainly, that kind of sets a bar, do you think?
When there was a barrier for entry, people were more likely to put things out that at least they had a lot more effort into or felt a lot stronger about, rather than kind of just throwing things at the wall for the immediacy. And it's great to have that experimentation, that outlet, but yeah, a lot of the times things you're going to find on SoundCloud and Bandcamp just are people's incomplete ideas.
Yeah, and it's not even super hard to tell by, like, the artwork and then, like, the first 10 seconds of whatever you click on that it's not quite worthwhile for you. So
yeah, I know that, thinking way back into the early 80s world of punk and hardcore, there are recordings out there that are horrible, hiss-filled, that are so important and kind of foundational, but for the most part they serve a role in history more so than something that you're going to want to listen to again and again. You're much happier that that recording actually happened in a better environment.
And so what other, like, blogs and outlets over the years that you've seen have, like, kind of won your attention, would you say?
Oh gosh, I didn't know this was going to be a history lesson.
It doesn't have to be.
No, I think that there were a few that kind of came and went that were mostly digital in the late 90s and early 2000s. I think The Zone was just so popular that I think, and a lot of people would contribute to that. So I think there were less other people out there. Now when I go to a show, there are, 5 different people with cameras shooting for a particular website or blog or just their feed on Twitter or Facebook or whatever the case is, where that wasn't so much the case back then. Again, part of that was just barrier of entry. It just wasn't as easy then. So now you've got a lot more voices, but I don't recall the other blogs that I read at that time. I remember Zone just being so important, and I definitely was just the upstart outsider. And occasionally I would write things for The Zone because I wanted a bigger audience than what my own website would provide. I think now you've got a number of sites that exist in Kansas City that just definitely dwarfs anything that had been there in the past. And different levels of aspiration and interest. Some people just documenting where they are, and it's a blurry Instagram story of this is the show I'm at, and some people really looking at this as this is their career. So I think both of those have valid things to offer, and I enjoy both.
And I don't, like, at least since I've been following your work, I haven't seen you contribute to really any other websites or magazines or anything. Is there a reason for that specifically, or do you just prefer to keep it as a hobby?
No one's asked.
Yeah.
No, I think for the most part I'm busy, and occasionally I'll think, well, I want something that I want to build something longer form. I want to write something. I want to write a feature, things of that sort. But I'm just so busy that I don't think I can commit to doing that for someone else where there's a particular deadline or that needs to be met, or just playing by the rules. I mean, I've done Too Much Rock for so long, and the focus has always been just this is my life as it is, whether it's what shows I go to, what or the podcast, what music I get every week. It's just a dump, and I don't try to curate it in any way for a particular audience. It's curated for what I want to do with my life, and if people want to engage in that, if they're interested in that, that's great. I mean, the origin of Too Much Rock was there was too much rock for me to write about in a zine, a paper zine that came out every quarter. Reading a review of a show that happened, 2 months ago was not particularly interesting. And so that's how the website was born, just because there was too much rock for me to cover with a paper zine.
Was the paper zine called Too Much Rock, or?
No, the paper zine was called Urinine. I had a record label of the same name, but the zine was Urinine, and it ran from 93 to 97, something of that sort.
And I know via Too Much Rock, you've put out singles from like the Uncouth and what other you did? Which Jail?
Which Jail, Schwervon, Berwinger, Rev Gusto, Uncouth. Those are I think the 5 I've done.
And I think it's a cool setup that you do is you just raise the funds yourself to put the record out, and you give half to the band and you sell half on your own?
I give them all to the band.
Oh, you give them all? Okay. Yeah,
for years I ran a record label in town, Urinine Records, and from kind of locals, I don't know, I think, Nameless Number Headman, the Capsules were probably the biggest local bands on the label. And it got to the point where when I was in Boston, I had 3 or 4 interns. I was working on it full time. I was spending $20,000 on a release between the recording and the promotion and all that, and found I was fighting with Warner Brothers and the major labels to try to get the same space in magazines or air on MTV or whatever, and realized that was ridiculous. When I started the label in the early 90s, it was really putting out records that for my friends that the bars wouldn't let those bands play, and the magazines certainly weren't going to cover them, and it was like, this is something separate and different. By the time it was 2003, the music industry had changed enough that we were kind of in the same space, and you're just never going to win that battle. So I realized, rather than spending $20,000 trying to promote a record and working so hard and losing most of that money, maybe not most, but still losing money on every release, I'd much rather just spend $1,500, put out a record from a band that I think needs some help, and give them it away. I'm losing the same amount of money I did before, but now I don't have all the headaches of trying to be the guy that's trying to arrange distribution and promotion and all those things. I just hand them to the band and let them do with them what they will.
And so obviously, like, some of the bands that you've put out through the Too Much Rock single series have been ones that, maybe like local favorites of yours and bands that you go see a lot. But what would you consider some of, like, I mean, maybe you don't have this thing in your head, but I feel like on Shuttlecock, I kind of do have like a set of bands and artists that I do like go to almost every show of and all that. So like what do you think some of like the most covered Too Much Rock acts have been over the years?
I was looking at this the other day, and there are some bands that I have shot probably 11 or 12 times. I think, especially if you count all of Josh Berwinger's projects, it's probably been like 25 if you count all the anniversary shows as well as his Berwinger outfits, and then Radar State as well. So lots of coverage for them. It seems like I've seen the Whiffs like 6 times in the last 6 days. I mean, they're just constantly playing, and I love it every time. So I've covered them a lot. Schwervon I have seen a ton. They are my favorite band in Kansas City, I think. So I can't see them enough.
What makes that group special to you?
I think, one, they're wonderful people. They are always, anytime they play a show with somebody else, they are always up front watching the other bands play. And they're usually dancing to the other bands. They're just really supportive of other people and building the scene, which is interesting. And Matt started in Kansas City and bands way back when. Then they moved to New York, and he was there in the Lower East Side for a while, part of that early anti-folk or freak folk or whatever scene. But then coming back here, and just immediately jumped into the scene and kept continuing to build it. And so they're always out supporting other bands. I see them at shows all the time, which is amazing for a band who, like, every year does a tour of Europe and does, like, at least 2 tours of most of the U.S. I mean, they're just amazing that when they're home, they're not just hibernating or working like crazy trying to make money to go out and do it all again. Musically, I think I just love them. I like Matt's big guitar. I think it's big and muscular and driving and nice. And then I think the lyrics are just smart. And I think that the interaction between Matt and Nan is really good as well. I like couples in bands. I like to watch them look at each other and the way they communicate with each other via just nods or glances or smiles, and know that they're planning on what's next, or they're saying, man, you just messed up there. I can't believe you did that. And I think that's fun.
So yeah, you've told me about a couple show stories that you've had, and I think they're both pretty entertaining. You were telling me about the 2 times where you've felt scared for your life at different shows.
Yeah, I think that in Indianapolis, a show at I forget the name of the venue now, the Emerson, an old movie theater that was converted to a show space, and it may still be around. It was definitely a mainstay in the early 90s, even late 80s, I think. But I saw Anal Cunt play there, and the band was surly, and they were always surly, and that was kind of their gig. But someone had started antagonizing the band, and it went back and forth, and someone from the crowd threw an empty trash can, just a rubber trash can, Rubbermaid, up there, and it just bounced on the stage, and Seth, the singer, kicked it back at him and said, try again. And the guy did it again, and he hit the drummer. And the drummer immediately jumped up, chased the guy down like the center aisle because it was a movie theater, chased him out. We all kind of filed through there and followed it and watched the drummer beat the guy up on the sidewalk and then come back in, and then they continued the set there. Throughout that set, people continued to throw things, and they were throwing like heavy bar stools, like the kind that have the big padded top and metal legs, throwing them at the band, and the band throwing them back at the audience. And it really one of those things, if you weren't paying attention, you got clocked with one of those. I mean, it could be the end. So some of that show, I was hiding behind the mains, like, I don't want to be part of this one.
Were you taking pictures of that one?
No.
Might be a good thing.
Yeah, well,
I've lost a camera there.
Yeah, I have lost a camera before.
Yeah, well,
at a casket lottery show at the Hurricane. I was right up front shooting the band, and in those days I kind of used to be front and center and stay there the whole time and block everyone's view, and I'm sure they all hated me. But I was front and center, and something was wrong with Stacy's bass, and it was cutting out, and he was mad at it, and he was mocking like he was going to smash it on the stage. And everyone was like cheering him on, like, do it, do it, do it. And I don't think he really wanted to, but then once they cheered him on, he's like, I've got to. So I've got the camera out because this is going to be a great shot, right? Somebody smashing their bass. But as he swung down and hit it, I had the camera up in front of my face. A piece of wood came and shot in directly and shattered the lens.
Oh, man.
So, like, if my camera wasn't there and my glasses or whatever, I could like ended up with the big stick in the eye. So I did lose that camera, and after it broke, I just kind of looked at it and went, I think I pulled the battery out and just rolled it up on stage on him and left the show. I was so mad. Which, I mean, obviously it wasn't their fault, and he was just doing it because he's a rock and roller, and that's what rock and rollers do. And later the band helped me buy a new camera, so that was very nice of them, something they didn't need to do. But yeah, so that's the only camera I've lost. I had one stolen at a show at El Torian once, but that's not as exciting of a story.
Is that a venue that you covered pretty heavily?
Yeah, I did a lot of the booking at El Torian from, 2000 to 2002, something of that sort. Anytime that there was a show that was more math rock or indie rock or any show that other people didn't really want to go to, that was probably the show that I booked. The rest of the shows were really mostly booked by Brian, and it was a lot of street punk and punk then. And that was an interesting venue because it wasn't really like the bars. It wasn't quite as commercial as those things, though some of those bands did play there. But it also was the basement shows, too. I mean, bands like When Good Robots Go Bad or Chimera, or bands that were playing house shows, were also playing their biggest shows at El Torian. So that was an interesting venue when that was around.
Yeah, because Blindside USA played their final show last week in the renovated version of that building, and that was like the whole night you were just hearing like stories of like the old venue and all that. So that was kind of an interesting moment.
Yeah, when they did their remodel, one of the guys that was a member of the church brought me in and kind of gave me the tour of everything they've done, and they've done a lot. I mean, over time, El Torian changed quite a bit. I mean, we started off doing shows in the big room where the garage bays were, and then moved into the side room, I think, where this show actually was. And, went from smaller stages to big stages, back to smaller stages. Sound got better. For a while, we had a bar. We didn't have a liquor license, but we had a catering permit for every show. But we had like a 12-foot chain link fence between the bar and the rest of the club so that we could still have all ages shows. So that it was like a special catered area, but like everyone had to stay behind a chain link fence like they were in a cage. It was not ideal, but it was hard to get some people to show up for some shows that in a venue with no alcohol. So that was kind of the compromise.
That's good.
I remember lots of El Torian stories. Bigger bands that played there that were crazy and confused. Man of War played there. It's the only band that has ever refused to let me take pictures of them.
Wow.
Their press agent said, absolutely no photos. We'll send you photos that you can run. So I guess they were worried I might catch the bald spots or something and publish those. And there was a Fugazi show where I think I was at the door, what was being used as a green room for the band, and somebody came up and said, hey, there's two people over there having sex on the piano. And I was like, I'm not sure exactly what to do about that. But so I walked over, maybe out of curiosity more than anything else, and told them to move on. But yeah, sex on the piano at a Fugazi show at the El Torian.
It's very strange.
Yes.
Most of the stories I hear there are just plain violent, but that's one of the stranger ones I've heard.
Yeah, I don't remember a whole lot of violence, honestly.
Maybe that's because you were doing the math rock shows.
Yeah. I remember when Good Robots Go Bad, might have been like their last show, but they had built giant cardboard robots and there was a big robot royale battle at the end, but I don't remember a lot of fights or just violent pits or anything like that.
I don't know. I didn't mean for this to just to be a conversation about just like violent stuff at shows, but it's kind of fun to talk about. But I'm surprised you didn't see more stuff like that when you were like, because you're a pretty big like oi punk fan, aren't you? So like, I figure some of those shows get pretty wild. I don't know.
Yeah, I think most of the time that I've seen any real violence on those, it's kind of on the periphery of the show. People hanging out in the alley afterwards or during bands or whatever that have spoken badly to somebody else, and then somebody gets a beat down. Or I think even I was a show at Davies not long ago where somebody got out of hand and got kicked out, and then he got mad and like kicked over somebody's motorcycle or something on the way out, and then he got chased down, and I think Stern talking to probably. I'm not sure exactly what happened there, but I don't usually see it at the show. I usually see it like just outside the show. Oh
yeah, that's good. Like Kansas City is at least like a very. I wouldn't consider it a violent scene in many. Any aspect.
No, I don't think so.
Like at least not anymore. Like people would be telling me stories about from like 10 years ago where that kind of stuff would happen, but can't think of anything recent.
Not where I am, evidently, and that's okay. When I don't understand, like for example, on a recent episode of the Shuttlecock podcast, he had a guest on talk about how great it was, like various things were getting smashed, and I'm always like, what do those chairs do? Why does everyone hate chairs so much?
No, yeah, that's a recurring thing at a lot of the hardcore shows, just smashing chairs and whatnot. Oh, it was a bummer. Someone smashed open just a big, like a wholesale can of like baked beans, and I was just like, if that gets on my pants, I'm not gonna be happy about it.
You weren't wearing new kicks, were you?
No, my Vans are pretty broken in at this point, so I wouldn't be too worried. But I did, like, someone busted open a paint can at Gacy's place one time when, like, who was playing, a band called Burp and Fine Young Casuals were playing. So it was just like pink paint that was splattered all over. I did get new jeans. Like, that was not a fun time for me.
I'm sure it was a very fun time for whoever smashed it open, though.
It had to have been, hopefully. I hope it was fun. I hope someone got something out of that.
And if you find out who, you can send him the bill for your new Levi's.
No, it might have been Trey or someone before he moved. I don't know, but I'm not upset over it. It's all right.
Glad to hear you moved on.
Yeah. But what else was I just gonna mention? Oh yeah, we were also talking about message boards and like just local music message boards, how that was kind of a big thing back like 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, well, I don't even know about 5-10 years ago.
Yeah, 10-15.
Yeah, we're moving back a little bit further.
And wait, so you were saying, did The Zone have its own message board?
It did, and that was, well, actually, now that I think about it, I'm not sure if it was technically The Zones or just linked in there. It was like called the Kansas City Music Forum, I believe is what it was called. And I think it ended up continuing and being run by Scott from Kill Creek, might have been in charge of that or in some capacity. But it was an excellent source of music. And it's where people found out about shows. It was good for, it had a relatively kind of high signal to noise ratio. No such thing as really trolls at that point. There were disagreements, but there wasn't. It was still usable. I can't imagine, a forum that could exist today because it would just be full of people saying you suck. But that was very important in the late '90s, early 2000s. That forum, I know, that's how I found out about every show.
And have all of the Too Much Rock shows that you've thrown, have those mostly been just like release shows for the records you've put out, or what kind of shows have you set up?
Yeah, I haven't done any real booking or promotions for years. Really not much since the El Torian days. I think I just don't even know how to do it anymore. in the olden days, it was, put up flyers on every phone pole, and I'd walk around for days and, with my staple guns. But I don't know that anybody's taping flyers up or stapling the poles in Westport anymore. And so I don't know how I would get people there short of just, hey, look, a Facebook event exists. Someone please RSVP.
Yeah, it doesn't always work.
Yeah, and you've done enough shows to know how painful that is when, it's like, all right, show starts at 8, and you're looking around like there's 3 people here and 9 guys from a band who are staring at you wondering what happened.
Yeah, I think we're both kind of notorious for being a little too early to most shows we're at, too, at least like punk shows.
I am always early. If you tell me the show's going to start at 7, I will show up at 7, and I'll probably sit there for 2 hours until that show really starts.
Do you just have like really bad FOMO as well? I think that's
I've
it
got
for me.
OCD is the issue.
Yeah.
I want to see a show from start to finish. Every band, and it stems back from like the hardcore days in the late '80s, where your friends were always the opening band. When some hardcore band was touring through, when Avail was coming to town, your friends were the local openers, and you wanted to be there early to support them. And your band was in the same situation, so you wanted them to come up and support you. So I still believe in like supporting that opener. And for me, it being able to see that whole show from opener to final encore is really important. I feel, I don't know, kind of queasy when I don't. So there have been times when I'm like, well, I would be 10 minutes late to the show, so I can't go, because if I went and I'd missed the first 10 minutes, I would just be disturbed all night. So just skip the show entirely.
Yeah. So that doesn't happen too often, does it? It
happened to me just a couple days ago.
Don't want to name any names.
No. Oh, no. I showed up late on accident. The minibar recently has been really good about putting set times up, like actual set times. Like this band's playing at 11:15, and there was a show the other night.
The Giants chair.
No. This was the high-waisted, the coax show, and it was supposed to start at 9:30 according to the website, and I showed up at 9:22, and the first band had actually started at 9.
What?
And yeah, I felt really bad for them because like no one was there, but the website didn't even say it was supposed to happen yet. And then later it was like fairly packed for the coax. I'm sorry, the Cokes. Yeah, sorry. So it was fairly packed for them, so I felt bad for that first band, Meglacoil, who played to like nobody, and mostly because the venue kind of screwed them.
And so you do, in addition to the photos and videos and the show write-ups, you do the podcast, the Too Much Rock podcast, and that's basically all just stuff that you're kind of currently listening to?
Yeah, it's I like boundaries. If you just said, hey, give me a half-hour music every week, I'd go crazy. Like, what do I put on there? I mean, I used to do radio shows in college, and I enjoyed that element, but it was, a 2-hour show or a 3-hour show, and I could decide, hey, what Sex Pistols track do I want to put on there or whatever, back in those days. But when I was looking at podcasts now, I kind of thought I can take the same story that Too Much Rock uses, and Too Much Rock is just what shows I'm at, what things are entering into my life, and that's what the podcast is. It's just how does music enter my life? So every record I get, I listen to, and then I play a track on the podcast. So it doesn't matter if I just picked up a Shoes record from 1979, or if it's something brand new. It's going to get a play on the podcast, which is mostly good, but sometimes I'll be like, sorry guys, I picked up this, classic Tammy Wynette country album, and I also picked up this folk metal album by Wintersorg, and I got to try to figure out how to fit them onto the podcast with, 5 or 6 other songs in a half hour and make it listenable, which sometimes it may not be.
You'll put stuff on there that you just don't enjoy sometimes.
Well, hopefully that doesn't happen, because while every bit of music I get ends up on that podcast, I'm pretty selective about what I get.
Yeah. It's all like stuff you buy on vinyl and.
It's a mix. Sometimes it's things I buy on vinyl, and sometimes it's things where a PR person has said, "Hey, check out this band," and I'll check them out. I'll listen to the links and go like, "Yeah, that sounds like something I could work with," and then I'll commit to that, and then I listen to it for a week or two. Listen to it in kind of a couple of different surroundings, on the computer, in the car, headphones, not headphones, enough to kind of figure out where that album works. Because I'm sure you've experienced like some albums sounds so much better in a moving car with the windows down, and some sound better on a quiet night with headphones on. And so I try to listen to a record in different ways, but then I'm going to play it. Now, if like the PR person or the band that I saw live that I bought their record and like, oh, they were fantastic live, and then you get home and you like listen to the record and you're like, oh, this isn't good at all. I'm going to play that on the podcast still, and I'm going to say, hey, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. Bear with me, and we're gonna play this record that I think should have been much better than it is.
And you're just gonna give it to your audience, like just how you're getting it. That's
and there was a reason I got it, right? So if it was a band that I had seen live and I really enjoyed, it's very easy to play this record and say, hey, this record is a bit of a disappointment. There's so much more energy live, or live there's so much more power, or there's more intensity that you're not getting on this record. So I can play a record that's not as good as it should be, or that's maybe not even good, but I can still tell a story and say, this is why this is important, or this is and this is why it matters. Sometimes I do that with records that just have gotten so much buzz. And you hear like a million people say, this record's great, this record's great. And I'm like, all right, fine, I'll get that record. And I come home from Mills and put it on. And like, I just don't see what people are excited about, because this just doesn't speak to me. But I know that a million people love that record, right? It made everyone's best year-end list or whatever. So just because I think it's no good, obviously my tastes aren't the end of it all. So I don't feel bad about playing on the podcast, even though I think it's not a good record, because I know that I'm probably in the minority on that one.
Do you have a pretty massive vinyl collection at this point?
I try to buy and sell pretty quick.
Yeah.
For years I had rooms of vinyl, and just moving with that, when you're packing up 30 different record crates of 12 inches and trying to move. I mean, I moved to Texas in 1993, and all of my possessions were like, here is a duffel bag of my clothes and 30 crates of records. And I moved around a lot over that, like the next 10 years from then. And I was like, I just can't handle it. So I slowly got rid of records, got them to people who wanted them. And I cherish coming home with a new record. I love putting it on the turntable, watching it spin, reading through. Hopefully got some lyrics, because I'm really bad about picking out lyrics without a sheet. But for me, I'm happy with that download code, because that can go anywhere with me. I travel a lot, and it's just, I'm not going to pack a turntable and a bunch of records in a backpack and head off to work in South America with it.
And how do you have a good estimate of how many you usually have at one time, though?
Couple hundred.
Are there some that you just like completely refuse to sell off?
Yeah, there are a lot of 7 inches that just mean a lot to me, from bands that I was very associated with, or very much a part of a particular scene or time. That, like, well, if I came across the right person that was like, oh man, I've been looking at that for years, I'd be like, all right, fine, it's yours. But
what are some of those records?
Wow, there's a 10-inch I have from a band called the Problematics in Indianapolis that, I don't know, just the right time, right place when you listen to that record. And it's like, so it's sitting on my shelf still right front and center, and I've never thought, I need to get rid of that. It's never that like they're fantastic records, because I get rid of a lot of fantastic records. It's always ones that, or maybe it was a band called Vampire Lesbos, which was one of the very first punk shows I ever saw, and like the next day I found that record used at Missing Link, I think was the name of the record store that existed at that time, and Kansas City? No, Indianapolis, and So that record there, and it's like neon pink and black and drippy Vampire Lesbos writing. That's one that, it's not even that good of a record, but it's one that I'll keep forever.
And I don't know, like I definitely want to have him on the podcast next time he's in town, because he's definitely like a really huge like Kansas City record collector. I'm sure you know Greg Stitt. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he did.
I send him a lot of records, actually.
Yeah, I always see you guys like going back and forth on Twitter talking about like new like Kansas City albums coming out and everything.
He also has started an Instagram feed of just documenting analog physical records that have come out.
At Analog KC. I think that's it, yeah.
And so a lot of times he's posting like some record that came out in 79 that he wasn't around for in Kansas City, and I wasn't, or he was probably, maybe he was born, I don't know, but he certainly wasn't, at the clubs that I'd never heard of before. And he's like, oh yeah, check this out, they sound like this or that. So I've been picking up records based on things that I see there from him. So it's not just like what's coming out, it's like what happened that I missed.
And he did a Kansas City music blog too. It was called Riot on the Plaza.
Yeah.
And that's always like, if I'm ever Googling like any old Kansas City band, he'll usually have like some kind of article on it. So
yeah, I missed that site. In fact, it's still part of my RSS feed. So if he ever posts something new, it's going to pop up on my feed, and I'll be able to see it. But
it's been a few years though, right?
Oh yeah. He did. He wrote something the other day for a publication and said that it kind of was his first time in a long time, and wondered if that was the start of a resurgence. So I hope so, because it's good to have multiple voices.
And he's living in Austin, Texas right now?
He's in Austin, yeah.
I wonder, like, do you know what he does out there? Like
I don't.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess a part of me hopes he'll move back sometime, because he has a lot of knowledge of the Kansas City music scene.
Yeah, and he works very hard to keep up with the scene, even though he's not here physically.
I think he's like definitely the biggest Kansas City music fan outside of Kansas City.
Yeah, I think he wins that award.
But yeah, what have been some of your favorite shows that you've covered for Too Much Rock this year?
This year? Well, actually, one of my favorite shows this year is one that I didn't cover at all. It was the Sheer Mag show in the basement of Blind Tiger.
Yeah.
And I came to cover that show, and I shot some really bad photos, and it was very dark and very crowded. And then when Sheer Mag played, it was just an explosion, and there was no way I could get any photos that meant anything at all. It would have just been random blurs. So I put down the camera and just jumped in the middle, and everyone was dancing and jumping, and just was fantastic. Probably the best show I've seen in Kansas City in the last couple of years. But there's absolutely no mention of that on the Too Much Rock website.
But you did not quite enjoy their recent Lawrence set as much, did you?
No, I think the band sounded great.
Yeah.
But the crowd was just dead. I mean, there was no motion, no energy. Everyone stood back 3 feet from the stage with their arms crossed and watched the band. And a couple people tried to dance, but there's just no energy. I'm not sure what the issue was. I don't know if it was the venue or the fans or what, but it was not good.
Was it you that tweeted like it might be the NPR New York Times effect?
Yeah, I wondered because you had that big New York Times article saying Rock's Not Dead, it's just female fronted, and then the NPR's always been loving on Sheer Mag since like the second 7-inch. But I didn't see those people there. And to be honest, those people are kind of my peers. But I didn't see anyone with their wait, don't tell me tote bag or whatever in the crowd. So, and it's hard to think that the kids that were up front, the 19 to 20-year-old kids that are at KU really were like, well, I've read about it on the New York Times, and I came to the show, and well, it just maybe wasn't what I wanted to see. It's hard to imagine that had an effect, but
yeah, I couldn't quite, like, I was only there for the first band, but like I couldn't even quite pinpoint like where everyone had heard about it, other than maybe just hearing from the Bottleneck. I don't know, because like I don't think like the KU radio station had much to do with it. there, I don't know, it might have just been like Falley's blog, I Heart Local Music, but like, cause I guess they like presented it, so maybe that was it. But yeah, it was kind of a weird crowd for that, I guess.
Yeah. So I mean, that would have been one of those situations where you just have totally different expectations, and you walk away either excited or bummed out, and you win some, you lose some.
Yeah, I think like a total of like 5 Kansas City punks like made the trip out, like, so. Yeah.
Michaela was there buying shots, but it wasn't a big presence from KC Punks.
Yeah, I think Bennett was there too, but I think he told me he was sick, so he was just kind of like hanging in the corner, like, yeah, sure, really.
Yeah.
But yeah, what else have you been excited about this year that you've seen?
That I've seen, I really enjoyed a Blind Tiger show that was a couple of Dallas bands, Loafers and what was the first band? It'll come to me, but I'm always excited. I go to a lot of shows that I just really don't have any notions about what it's going to be. Especially at Blind Tiger, it's blocked from my house. It's $5 to get in, and so it's really easy. I listen to one song on Bandcamp and go like, yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
And
was that band, Lizzie Boardman?
Yeah, Lizzie Boredom. Yeah. Thank you. But both of those were just excellent. So I really enjoyed that show. I really enjoyed the Cokes and High Waisted just last week at Mini Bar, and they're coming back through to play the replay with Drugs and Addicts on middle of October. And I think I'll probably make that trip as well, which it's always a little odd when a band plays a Lawrence show and a Kansas City show. And this is, I think, the first time I think that I want to see both of those.
Yeah. And do you really you don't make it out to Lawrence all too often, do you?
I don't. There's a lot happening in Kansas City. Yeah. It used to be, when I first moved here, Kansas City didn't have a lot going on. And I was out at the Bottleneck or at the Replay like 3 or so nights a week, driving back and forth. But now, if I want to see a show, there's plenty of local options that don't involve me driving, and get me home an hour earlier. There's a threshold, right? So like I can say, well, this band is good, but this band's pretty good, and they're real close. So I'll just go to the pretty good band. It's got to be something exciting, like that. The Screaming Female show that's coming up.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
I will drive out to Lawrence for that because I've seen that band a number of times and I just love them. So good shows are always going to get me out to Lawrence, but it's going to take a really good show.
Mm. And so yeah, did we talk about this before or during? I'm forgetting now. That you just haven't really contributed to. No, yeah, we talked about that. Man, I'm pretty forgetful sometimes. Do you usually do like a year-end list?
I do, and I kind of break it down into a number of different things. I really should be doing like my favorite shows of the year, but I don't, which is odd because that's what I spend most of my time doing. I definitely count down my favorite records. I count down my favorite songs, which is... I'm very much a believer in the album. When I get an album, I want to listen to it all the way through in the order that it's supposed to be, and I've got to, get like the full vibe of it. But ultimately, I'm kind of a singles guy, and it's a particular song that's going to usually like just give me all that energy and really excite me. So I count down the songs, and then I count down albums. And depending on the year, it may even separate things out to EPs. Like last year, there was a lot of really good EPs released that I kind of gave that list as well.
And do you do that on the podcast, or do you just write that out? Or
both. I write it out, but the podcast, the last one of the year, will be like the countdown of the top 7 or 8, whatever fits in a half hour, as I play those songs and talk about those records.
Mm. And so, how would you really describe, like, because... I don't know, at least once you do a lot of photography, you kind of notice, like, other photographers' styles and stuff. Like, How would you really describe your own photography style?
Yeah, I I shoot very tight. I don't get a lot of crowd shots. I try. It's almost like I'm doing portraits of each individual musician. I've got pretty low vision, and I'm completely blind in my right eye. So, I don't see in like panoramic. So I don't shoot in panoramic as well. I very much focus on individuals. I shoot with a tight, usually like an 85 millimeter lens, and I'm focused very much on an individual, and then that's kind of what I shoot as well. I don't generally shoot flash. For years, I used to use an off-camera flash to give me a little more light. Now, one, it just feels weird to add artificial light because I'm changing the experience. And so I don't usually do that. I love people who do. And there's some photographers that are just fantastic with flashes and building nice high contrast photos out of them. But it just feels weird to me. I try to shoot color whenever I can, only when it's a venue that has like one very bright light and no other lights, and that bright light is like red. Do I have to switch to something else? So it's hard to shoot color in Blind Tiger. It's hard to shoot color in Minibar, but it's really easy in some place like the Riot Room, which has really stepped up their light game recently. It's really about taking what the club gives you.
And so are there any like reviews and stuff like that have really like stuck out to you that you've done either like recently or just way back that have gotten like a lot of response, or just ones that you are like particularly proud of?
To be honest, I never hear. No one ever reaches out and like, oh gosh, I really liked that one, or that really summed things up well, or that made me think of something differently. When I have time, my show accounts, and I'm always particular to call them show accounts, not reviews, because for a long time my show accounts were like, let me tell you about what I was listening to when I was driving to the show, or let me tell you about what my shoes were like, because that was just as much as part of the experience as whatever was happening on stage. But so when I have time and I have able to write more, I try to put some context around a show and why it was interesting, or what it made me think about. And those ones are ones that make me happy. When it's shorter and it's really just kind of describing the bands and what they sounded like or what they did, it's fine, and it's nice to have that sort of history, but not as interesting. But neither one of those, like, do I get a lot of feedback on. The only time I get feedback was when I've ticked somebody off, and then they're sure to let me know that, like, I'm a loser and whatever else they can throw at me, and then I've got it all wrong. And those are the ones that you hear about. I have like some folders in my email. One is called like the kudos folder, like when people were like, oh, I really like that, and it's got like 3 or 4 things in it from the last 20 years. And then I've got like the you suck folder, which has like 50 emails in it from people telling me how bad and how I got something wrong about their band.
Yeah, you spelled our guitarist's name wrong.
Yes, I think I did that to Drippies once. Like Bennett became Benny or something like that.
Yeah, I think that was it.
I went back and corrected that one, so
I thought you were...
all apologies.
Yeah, I thought you might have just like become really good pals with him.
Yeah,
and like, oh yeah, good old Benny.
Yeah, really chummy. We've got pet names for each other.
But yeah, people are always very happy to be vocal when something's messed up. But when you do something good, like, yeah, I'm not gonna say anything about that.
Yeah, and so
it's nature, I guess.
Now I think that feedback is different. You can judge when things are good or bad based on retweets or likes or hearts or whatever whatever vehicle there is there, and say, well, people must have liked this one. When I see that a video of the Uncouth has been viewed 8,000 times, I know that, well, something about this struck a chord with some people. When I see that something's been viewed 3 times, I think, well, nobody really cares about this band. So you get a little bit of that, but you don't get the messages that say, oh my gosh, you changed my life. occasionally I'd get somebody that would send me a note on the podcast saying, hey, I heard this band on their podcast. They're really good. I went out and bought the album, and that's great. I love it when that happens, but that doesn't happen a lot.
But you're talking about how, like, you're in your show accounts, you'll often like kind of include like kind of details about like your very personal experience at that show and just personal stuff in general from like that day. But are those types of articles stuff that you really enjoy reading from other people, or is that just like because you enjoy documenting that for yourself?
I do. Like my favorite kind of zines are always just like the travel zines. The mundane elements of people's lives, where they've been, what are they doing, and what are they thinking about, and I love those sorts of zines, and that's how my show accounts were really written that way. So I follow things in a chronological order. So the headliner doesn't start, and then you don't like at the end say, oh, and also these two other bands played and they were fine. The headliner gets no more focus usually than the opening bands, because for me, time marched on in that direction, and that's how I document things. So yeah, I like reading things that way, and so that's the way I write. And I don't know if that's good, bad, or indifferent.
And do you think you enjoy reading those just because it's like kind of comforting to read sometimes? Like, oh, these people have these types of thoughts too, and like all that kind of stuff? Or
yeah, and sometimes it's there's some solidarity there, and these people are struggling with the same things I am, and sometimes I'm just entirely interested to see the perspective of this other person that is very foreign to me. So I'll pick up zines that when I'm traveling, Kansas City doesn't have an excellent place. Occasionally something interesting will pop up at Prospero's or, the Zine Cons or whatever. But when I'm traveling and, I go to the record store, it's like, all right, I'll take these 4 and they're, $1 each, and I can't go wrong there, right? And then I'm like, oh, I'm learning about what it's like for, a black trans man to serve in the military. And I'm like, I have no context for that. I don't know anything about that, but I'm learning something, and I'm interested in kind of that story. So whether or not somebody is very interested in Giant's Chair, or they're just interested in what is it like for this middle-aged guy to go see a band that meant a whole lot to him 25 years ago, maybe that's interesting either way.
Awesome. And I think that's most of what I wanted to talk about. So yeah, people can read shuttlecockmusic.com, and there's a web store there. You can buy a t-shirt and support the site that way. And there's the Shuttlecock House Party coming up on October 7th, and that's in Kansas City with Solomon and Devil's Den, and you can get details on that on the website. And you can follow at Shuttlecock Mag and listen to the podcast on iTunes and watch on YouTube. And yeah, Sid, where can people find your work?
Yeah, it's toomuchrock.com is the website. I am on Facebook a little, and Instagram and Twitter, all at Sid Much Rock. You can find me there. And I try to post a little something different everywhere. You can even follow me on Google Plus.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
That's where that's where it's going in 2018.
The kids are already on that, I'm sure. But I try to put something different on each of those sites. And like the Google Plus is just like, these are my favorite videos. Like when I see something every week, I'm like, I really like this video. So I talk about it a little bit and post it on Google Plus. So I'm everywhere if you hunt me down. Sid Much Rock most places.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.